All right, in this video we are learning about domain and range. You may have heard these words before, maybe not, but I'm going to re-explain them to you. So, domain is a list of all of the x values in a function. All of the x values, and really it doesn't have to be a function, it could be a relation. So it might not pass the vertical line test, but we can still list out the x values. So right now for domain and range, it doesn't matter if it's a function or not. And so when we write out domain, we're gonna put a D there, D for domain. And we use our curly brackets. I can usually do the left one pretty good. My right one looks pretty bad, but it's okay. So our domain, when we write out, and I want you to make this note, when you list your domain, you want to list the numbers in order from least to greatest. Sometimes in your table or in the list or in the mapping, they're not going to be smallest to largest. But when you write out the domain, it needs to be least to greatest. So for our domain, I'm just going to list the x values. -1, 0, 4, 5, and 6. And that's it. Range, if you take a wild guess, you're probably going to say, well, range is probably a list of all of the y values. And just like with domain, you need to list it smallest to largest, or least to greatest. Put an R for range. -9, -8, -5, -2, and 3. That is the range. So for these examples, we're going to list the domain and range, and we're going to tell if it's a function or not. And remember, for it to be a function, the x values do not repeat. Okay? So domain, list the x values, smallest to largest, -3, 0 to 5. Range, list the y values. As I'm looking through this list, I see that I have a 7 on there twice. Anytime you have a number repeat, you don't write it twice. You only have to write a number one time. So 2, 6, 7. Is this a function? We only look at the x values, and it is, yes, it's a function because all of the x values are different. Number 2, try number 2 on your own. Pause the video, fill this out, and then play the video. Domain is, that was ugly. Domain, -1, 1, 8. Range, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is it a function? No, it is not, because the ones repeat. Right, number 3, this is a mapping. It doesn't really, you don't really have to think about, okay, well, -6 is paired with 2. That doesn't really matter because we switch up the order anyway because we list them least to greatest. So for these, those arrows don't matter. We're just going to list the numbers, the x's for domain, -6, -1, 5, 7. The range, -9, 2, 3. Whoa. All right. Is it a function? Yes. All of those numbers on the x's only had one arrow, so they only went to one y. Number 4, domain, -8, 4, 6. Range, -5, 0, 1, 6. Is it a function? No, because that -8, the x, was paired with both -5 and with 6. So domain and range in these types of examples is super easy. You're just listing the numbers, they're listed there for you. When you have a graph, that's where it gets a little tricky. So I'm going to show you some things about how we write domain and range. And we write them in what's called intervals. So in a graph like this, it's impossible to list out all of the x's because, I mean, all of these, and we have an infinite number, all of these, and they all just run together. So, like, you got to think about the decimals and, like, 1.01 and 1.001 and 1.0001 and so on. You just can't list all those out. It's impossible. So we write it in an interval. And some rules when we write an interval is we're going to write the very first number, the very smallest number, and the very large number, the very biggest number, and we assume that that is included, that includes all of the numbers in between it. So, two things. Sometimes you'll see, and most of the time you'll see, a closed in or a colored in point. Your point will be just a normal colored in closed point. And we use a bracket. So if your point is all colored in, we use a bracket. If it is an open circle, we use a parenthesis. Because an open circle means there's like a hole in the graph, like a break. So it almost includes all the points, but not that exact one. All right. So, for this example, because I'm not really, there's some extra things with domain and range that you're not learning yet. You'll learn that later. I actually want you to color this one in because that changes some things and it's not something that you're going to learn yet. So for this graph, we want to look at the exact points, like the farthest left, the farthest right, the farthest bottom, the farthest top. And we're going to write those points out. So this is the point -4, 4. So basically anywhere you see a point, we're going to write it. This one over here is the point 4, 2. And the one that I told you to color in is the point -1, -2. And that's like all the big points in this. And so the way that I write domain and range is for the domain, I'm going to look at the smallest x and the largest x. So if I look here at my graph, the smallest x is -4. And the largest x is 4. I don't have any x values that are bigger than 4. Now, because those are closed circles there on the end, I'm going to put a bracket. We put a comma in the middle, and the other side gets a bracket because it's also a closed circle. For the range, I'm going to look at the smallest y and the largest y. So my smallest y is -2, and that's going to get a bracket because it was a closed point. And the biggest y that I have is 4, and that's going to get a bracket. And is this a function? Yes, it passes the vertical line test. All right. Now let's look at these points and just write out. All right, this is the point -3, 0. This is another big point. It's kind of, it's the top of a hump, so I'm going to write it. It's on a nice place. It's easy to find. And even though I don't really see a big point, as long as you don't see an open circle, you can assume that it's a filled-in point. So that's the point 0, 0. I have the point 1, -4, and -2, -4. And again, I can assume that's a closed-in point because I don't see that open circle. Domain, we're looking at the x values. The farthest left that I go is -3. And it's going to get a parenthesis because that's an open circle. And the farthest right I go, the biggest x value, is 1. And that's going to get a bracket. For the range, the lowest or the smallest y value is -4, and it gets a bracket. And the largest y value is 0. All right. One point at 0 is an open circle. The other one is a closed circle. The closed circle is more powerful, so as long as there is a closed circle, it gets a bracket. And yes, it's a function. It would pass the vertical line test. Number 7. All right, we're going to assume, now this isn't the most perfect picture, but we're going to assume that these are all closed points because it doesn't show us otherwise. So we would have the point -3, 3, -1, 4, 2, -2, 3, 0. I want you to pause the video and see if you can figure out the domain and range on your own. When you think you have it, go ahead and push play and you can check your answer. So for this one, domain is -3 to 3. Range is -2 to 4. And yes, it is a function. Number 8. going to fill in some of these points. -2, 1, -5, -1, -2, -3, and 1, -1. Domain is -5 to 1. Range, -3 to 1. And no, it is not a function because it does not pass the vertical line test. It fails the vertical line test. All right, hopefully this made sense. If you feel a little confused on the graph part, go back and watch kind of the first few examples as I explain it a little more, and then feel free to email me and ask questions. Have a great day.